Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Haley Kelvin. I'm the Assistant Director of Events at the Novel Neighbor. We are a women-owned and independently operated bookstore in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm super excited for the next however long we take on this fun interview because I have the honor of introducing and talking to Alice Evelyn Yang for her book, Slinks towards Beijing, which is part of our Indies Introduce for this season. We're very, very excited. I had such a great experience doing the Indies Introduce panel with everyone. So if you haven't done it yet, you need to sign up now to do it because it was such a fun time. And like I said, I'm very excited to spend however long it is with Alice. So Alice Evelyn Yang is a Chinese American writer from Norfolk, Virginia. Her work has been published in MQR, AAWW's The Margins, and The Rumpus, among others. She is the recipient of the 2022 through 23 Jesmyn Ward Prize for MQR and completed her MFA in fiction in 2022 at Columbia University, where she was awarded the Philippe de Alba Fellowship and nominated for the Henfield Prize. This is her first novel. So everyone, welcome Alice Evelyn Yang.
Thank you so much for having me. Being part of the Indies Introduced list has just been so wonderful. And I mean, I always love frequenting my local bookstores or wherever I'm traveling, going to local bookstores. And I really think that indie booksellers are the backbone of the book industry right now, especially with all these, like Amazon and all these other monopolies coming in. So I'm so honored to get to talk to Haley.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No, during the process, whenever we were going through all of the different manuscripts, I saw Beast Links Towards Beijing on our list and I got so excited. It was one of those books that I've been highly anticipating. So I feel like it was very exciting that part of this process, I got to be able to read it super early as a manuscript. So I was very excited and I was very excited to get to talk to you because I had such an amazing time reading Beast and just it moved me to tears. I truly was obsessed with it. Plus, your cover was stunning. So I was just very excited that I could get to talk to you before pub dates. So as we get into it, what inspired you to write A Beast Links Towards Beijing?
Yeah, I came up with the idea for a Beast Links Towards Beijing, I want to say in undergrad. So I was probably around 2021 at the time. And for context, I'm about to turn 28 next month. So it's been a process. It's been years in the making. I came up with the idea during a period of my life where I was reading a lot of family sagas. So, East of Eden by John Steinbeck and Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee are the ones I cite the most often because I think they have the biggest impact on me at that age. And I talk about this a lot as a second generation immigrant. My parents never really opened up about their past, about their parents. And my interactions with my grandparents have been pretty limited. At some periods of my life, they came to stay with us in America, but it's so funny. I didn't even know their Chinese names. I always just refer to them by their titles, so like Lalo and Nai Nai. Um, and so they they're both intimate figures and also strangers, and I think all those silences created a lot of curiosity in me, and I wanted to sort of envision a family history that could be mine. And kind of the crux of A Beast Links Towards Beijing is this question of how do you deal with and reckon with trauma, especially intergenerational trauma, when you don't know what it looks like. And so writing A Beast Links Towards Beijing was taking pieces that I had learned from my parents, these little morsels of information that they would give me, like my dad would suddenly drop lore like randomly during a road trip and be like, "Oh yeah, my family actually had this like apothecary empire." And I'd be like, What do you mean?"
That lore just dropped.
I know, I know. This happens with like my friends too, who are also like second generation immigrants. Like my friend would be like, "Yeah, my dad just told me that he had to like kill his own dog during the Cultural Revolution because he also read A Beast Links Towards Beijing, and he's like, "This reminds me of the time that I had to kill my own family pet." And I was like, "Oh, what a
Wow.
what a
New lore.
surprise." What a fun family conversation. But yeah, so for me, it was filling in those gaps and understanding the history that I came from, especially growing up in America for most of my life. I never actually learned about these periods of history either. I grew up in Southern Virginia too, which you might have guessed if you read the book. But that education was very Western and even perhaps a bit problematic, especially because, it is a conservative area. And so I think for me, I just wanted to learn more about that history and kind of act like the act of like slipping on my parents' skin or my grandparents' skin and envisioning what kinds of history they lived through.
Mhm. When you were writing it then, were you like, did you talk to your parents more about like their experiences as you were like exploring it through Beast? Like, did you do your own like familial research as you did that?
I did. I mean, I wrote this book when I was, early
Yeah.
20s. So I believe I started writing it when I was, I want to say 22, 23, right?
Oh,
So right
yeah.
out of college, I went to grad school for my MFA and I started creating these scenes that would later become A Beast Links Towards Beijing. Although the first drafts of those, they've been changed so
Don't
much
look at the
that
first
they bear no
draft.
resemblance to the final product. But the idea of it I started when I was quite young. And I think also when you're a young writer, there's always that saying, like, write what you know. I don't always believe that to be true, but I do think, when you don't have as much life experience, you are writing and drawing from pieces of your life. And so for me, I talked a lot to my dad. You might not guess this from my book, but my father and I are quite close. Um, yeah,
Listen, I love that more
yeah,
than
yeah,
the
yeah,
book's version of like a familial father dynamic. So I love
yeah.
that for you, Queen.
Yeah, everyone's like, how bad are your daddy issues? And I'm like, you know what? I think everyone has some extent of daddy issues, but it's not that bad. Um, but yeah, my dad, he reads a lot actually. He reads a lot of literature in Chinese, and so I think because of that, he kind of understood what stories I was looking for and was really open with me about telling about his past, if I had specific questions, and some of it wasn't even related about his life. It would be like, what were the apartments like, growing up in the city? Like, where was the bathroom, because a
Oh,
lot of the apartments didn't have their own bathroom. It was a communal bathroom. Um, my mom was a lot more silent. And I think you can kind of see that in the mother figure of the book as well. She is very much like, I don't want to like talk about this period of my life anymore. I'm fully American now. And
mhm.
yeah, I think that's reflected a bit in that maternal character. But yeah, with my dad, he was so helpful. He helped me find like archival material, or he would browse these forums about people recalling their past in Chinese. And my reading and writing of Mandarin is not great, so finding those like having him translate those texts was really helpful for me during the research process.
That's like so cool. I feel like that's like a amazing way for you to be able to like connect with like both like your familial history and like with your own like father as well. So like I
Mhm.
think that is I feel like that's so special. So then like as you said before, it's kind of like Beast is a family saga and you briefly like mentioned like going into the historical t context of Beast.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about like how you did the research into like the historical like aspect of Beast as well?
Yeah, yeah. So as I mentioned, I talked a lot to my dad. He pointed me in the direction of, archival material
Yeah.
from in Chinese, so primary source texts or like forums where people are recalling their past in the Cultural Revolution. But for me, I had to do a lot of my research in English, right? Because reading Chinese is it's not my strong suit. I can speak it, but I think that's, the experience of a lot of diaspora kids is that they can speak fluently, but reading and writing is really hard. And so I read a lot of secondary sources. So I read like all of Frank Decatur's work. Um, I like scoured his whole canon. He wrote a lot of books on the Miles Great Famine, the Cultural Revolution, and even going back to like the Japanese occupation, as well as, Japanese-Chinese relations. I read a lot of academic texts, I would say. I was lucky that I started doing the writing while I was at Columbia because they have an East Asian library. And so I would like dig through the
That's
stacks of these books that had like clearly
nice.
never been checked out or had like been checked out like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that was really lucky for me. I have a lot of issues with the MFA programs, but I think that having access to all those academic resources, like right now I'm doing research for my second book, and it's a lot harder when I don't have access to these databases like JSTOR or ProQuest. So I was really lucky that I got to find all these articles and all these like scholarly journals that talk about anything I wanted. So, like integration of folklore and fate. I read this whole book on fox demons in like post-imperial China. Um, so it was a lot of reading, I would say. Um, I like obviously wish I could have dug into archives in China or done archival research, but I did start this in the pandemic. And also because I'm writing about the Cultural Revolution, there are all these censorship issues with doing
Um,
actual research in China. So I did a lot of secondary source research and then talking with my dad.
yeah, what was like the most like shocking thing that like, you learned while you were researching it?
I think for me, it was a lot of the violence that occurred in the Cultural Revolution, as well as, by like violence inflicted by the Japanese Kwantung Army. It wasn't new to me, but I think when I first learned about these incidents, it was quite shocking. So there's, Unit 731, which I wrote a short story about in The Rumpus, but about Japanese scientists doing human experimentation on the Chinese people while they were occupying Manchuria. And then, the rape of Nanking. I read Iris Chang's book on that. That was quite shocking. Cultural Revolution, I didn't learn about until much later in my life. And I think the violence that occurred there, especially that was being propagated by these teenagers, was really shocking. And everything that I wrote about, like the violent incidents that happened during Red August and during the Cultural Revolution, those are all things that happened. I remember my editor and agent were like, "Oh, do you think this might be like a little too grotesque?" And I was like, "These were lifted straight from,
Like
straight from primary
actual
source
text. This
text.
is
Yeah.
history.
Yeah, this is the history. I know it sounds like quite extreme, but this is things that actually happened during that period of time."
Mm. I know like Beast also has kind of like a like you kind of mentioned it earlier too, like a kind of mythological air to it. What was like your favorite, like as you were researching, what was like your favorite mythological thing that you researched too?
Mm. I think for me it was the fox demons. And I think for me it's because of the connotations of like feminism and, patriarchy that come with Chinese conceptions of fox demons. I think they're very much, vilified as the sort of like Madonna horror complex that
Yeah.
was kind of very prevalent during that time. And Yeah, I think that was really interesting. I did really enjoy doing a lot of the mythological research. It was a lot of reading about Japanese folklore and Japanese demons, as well as uh, Chinese demons, Chinese prophecies. And so, but I think the fox demons are really interesting, in particular because I think they're just a reflection of men's fears about women at the time.
Yeah. I really love historical novels specifically for like the research that goes into them. So it's always like it's so exciting like listening to you like talk about what like you researched into it. And I studied English in college and that was like the one thing I miss leaving college is the access to all of those databases. Just like wanting to learn something specific, I can't really do that anymore. So I totally get that, but I feel like you're so much smarter with the way you research and yours is more intentional. So I really love hearing about your research process. Um,
Thank you. Yeah,
yeah,
I just love JSTOR. I'm just such a
so
I,
we
I
both.
like I love the movie Midsummer, and there's like a
Yes.
quote in there where he's like, "You're a grad student, and I had to teach you how to use JSTOR." And I think that's so iconic because truly, what are you doing if you're in grad school and you still don't know how to use JSTOR?
No, so truly, I have only done my undergrad, and even I was like, okay, I do feel like this is a life skill to know how to do this. So on top of like the research, like I said before, and as we're talking, this is a family saga, and I feel like your characters in Beast are truly just the most like well-rounded characters I've ever read in a novel, and I just feel like they feel like people to me, and I am really interested on like how you crafted your characters and how you were able to like weave their stories together through like three different timelines.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first scenes I wrote were actually, the basis for chapter one. So sort of Kenzie and Wei Hong colliding after they were estranged for so long. But once I had this seed of an idea, I began writing with Ming, because my idea for the novel is this like Russian nesting doll, right? And so I wanted to start with what it was chronologically first, and that would be Ming, because I really wanted to show how the trauma was passed down from Ming to Wei Hong and how her actions and what she survived influenced how she was a parent, and so on and so forth, right? So how her parenting affected Wei Hong, and how the historical time period that he lived through affected him as a parent. And so it's sort of this nesting doll, right? Each subsequent generation carries what was what came before them. And to do that, right, I had to know exactly what was coming into the new generation. So I began chronologically with Ming. And I think, just there were some historical events I wanted to cover. I had this historical timeline, and I wanted her to live through the Japanese occupation, especially because, I don't think this is a period of history that is really talked about in the West. And so I wanted to cover these events uh, as the Japanese occupation and the Second Sino-Japanese War, especially because in terms of like geological time, these events aren't really too far away, right? Like there are still Chinese comfort women and Korean comfort women who lived through that time who are still alive today. Um, and yeah, I think just writing through those events, having those touchstones, and then envisioning a character living through them, is sort of how they were formed. And it's really interesting because sometimes what I had plotted out or outlined, the characters would do something different because they had taken on their own personality. And I would tell
Oh,
this to non-writers, and they would be like, "What, what do you mean the like created persona in your head has chosen to do a decision that you didn't decide on?" But I think that, as I was writing them, I was learning more about them, and they kind of developed their own decisions and their own mindsets. And so yeah, I learned them as I wrote them. I didn't have them preconceived. I had some basics, but I'm really more of a discovery writer. And so once I wrote everything chronologically, right? So I wrote Ming's timeline and then Wei Hong's childhood and then Kenzie's present day. I sort of took stock of what I'd written and tried to find, the interconnective tissue between those and like how I wanted to reveal things, right, about Wei Hong's lineage and about, kind of why he left. And so I just rearranged things and then I had to write transitions and so on. And that's how I wrote that book. I don't know if I would go through that writing process again. It's very
That sounds like a lot.
yeah, it's very much a patchwork quilt. And
Mhm.
something like I was never told about historical fiction is you have to research the most minute things. I was like, how do they carry around water? Like they
Oh,
obviously didn't have, like a hydro flask. Like what was the equivalent in historical times of a water bottle? Or like what kind of diet did they have? These very small things that you don't think about and then would appear for like one sentence, but actually took, like a whole
like
book of
hours
research.
studying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I don't know if I would go through this process again. It might be a while before I write a historical fiction, but it was very much like a patchwork quilt, I would say.
Yeah, it's so cool that you like, yeah, like as you said, a patchwork quilt. It's so interesting that you did it by generation, 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 and then wove them together. Like that is so cool. I just feel like your brain is crazy and I'm really into it. I think this book is just so good, you guys. I am really just like, you have to read it to believe it, if that makes sense, where I'm just like, this is one of those books that I feel like it will be like it feels like a modern classic. And as you were talking about your characters and how they like created like their own personalities, it really, really comes off on the page that I'm just like, these feel like real people that feel like they're experiencing human emotions. And it's very much like Body Keeps the Score of just like inheriting trauma. And I find that genuinely so interesting. I think it is so cool going through like different generations, exploring the same thing and how it affects like different people of like the same line. And what do you hope readers will take away after they read Beast Slinks Towards Beijing?
I think for me, I'd like them to, I mean, I think, my core audience is a lot of second generation children, right? Or diaspora,
Mhm.
uh Chinese. But for me, I think it has a wider reach where I think you can take stock of your family history and understand what kind of trauma that has been brought to you and what might have been passed down. But I also think that it's not something you have to carry in the future. It's sort of a message of that you can break these generational cycles and be better than, what you were taught and what you inherited. I also hope that readers, just understand that period of history more. I feel like there are so many World War II novels from a Western perspective, and then to see that same period of time from Asia and see also how imperialism was occurring, on the other side of the Pacific. I hope it inspires readers to maybe do a deep dive into, authors who are writing about that time who maybe are translated or writing in like non-Anglophone languages. I certainly read a lot of translated Chinese literature from authors like Mo Yang and Yang Lanke. And so I hope it just, creates a curiosity that people indulge and maybe are encouraged to learn more about these histories that we aren't necessarily taught.
Mhm. I definitely like agree. I feel like the Western form of teaching is, very westernized. And so after reading Beast, I really did do like a deep dive into like the history of like the general East and just the fact that like in American school systems, like we don't learn that. It is all very Americanized. And I think that's really important to like look outside of like your lived experience and be able to learn from your lived experiences. And I just think it's really important to be like more worldly. And it was really enlightening. And I really, really loved your book, girl. I loved it.
Thank you so much. Also, when you were like, I'm so astounded by your brain, I found that really funny because I'm currently going through such brain rot. I actually read an essay recently about this where I was like, unpublished, but just just like looking into my own mind, the brain rot is so bad. And
Oh,
I think that like the brain that wrote A Beast Slinks Towards Beijing is not the same brain that I have now because
it's a completely different
yeah,
brain.
yeah, because I've been on like TikTok for years.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
trying to rehabilitate my brain so I can write a second book, but
Listen, I feel very glad though that like we were both on like the same side of TikTok where it's just like just nothing but brain rot. So I
yeah,
love this for
yeah,
us. Our favorite authors
yeah,
are too accessible for us. They're just like you.
yeah, yeah. Authors are just like you. Yeah, we're also just brain rotten.
I know. And like being chronically on the internet, you are also chronically on the internet and you do have an alter ego online as Rotten Read, where you make hyper-specific book recs. So those are truly like my favorite things to look out for. I think I started following you from Rotten Read specifically for your book recs. And then when I realized you were the same person who was writing Beast Slings Towards Beijing, I was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. This is so perfect. And I do fear you truly just kill it with every single one of your book racks that I'm just like, I am astounded with your brain despite all of the brain rot. So I'd be like interested to see what hyper specific book racks that you would give to your characters.
Thank you. Yeah, I started Rotten Read because I realized I have this like secret skill where I'm able to recall a lot of book summaries and book descriptions.
And
It's
that
like
is a superpower, girl.
it's like the one thing that sticks in my brain along with like lyrics from the early 2000s. Like I can recall all the lyrics of Black Eyed Peas and also all these random book descriptions. Like 500 books that just live in my
The
head along with
dichotomy.
yeah, along with like the soundtrack of Hamilton.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's like what's taking up my brain right now. But yeah, I I think not a book rec, but I would recommend all the characters of A Beast Links Towards Beijing get therapy. Um
Ooh, in the great year of 2026, get
yeah,
therapy.
yes. But going off that, I think I would recommend all those characters read What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. That's,
Yes.
yeah, a memoir of
Yes.
healing from trauma and also exploring familial history. Uh, for Ming, I think she would really enjoy female rage books, especially because, she lived in a time where female rage was literally demonized, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I think titles like Out by Natsuo Kirino and maybe kind of like a Bookstagram darling is like uh Chelsea G. Summers. Her books, Eliza Clark. I think
Yeah.
she would really enjoy those and, kind of get to indulge in her female rage. Very well warranted female rage.
Yes.
For Wei Hong, I think maybe some Red Guard memoirs. I read those a lot during the research process, but Red Azalea by An Chi Min really stands out because the language was really lovely. Obviously she was talking about these really dark historical times. But I think that, what she was writing turned out it felt more like a novel. But I think, those memoirs would let him know that he's not alone, that also his trauma isn't special. And I think that for him, he kind of yeah, mythologizes his trauma. Also, I would recommend Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. I think that's a wonderful book about, also like a mother-son relationship, but from the perspective of the mother. And I really think that that might be healing in a way to understand his mother's perspective. Similarly, probably the graphic novel Grass by Korean writer Komsuk Gentry Kim. That's a graphic novel about a story of a Korean comfort woman. So I think those books just to like exercises empathy with
Mhm.
Ming. For Kenzie, I think she would really enjoy some late capitalism critique. Like the book that comes to mind is probably Severance by Ling Ma. Obviously that's from the perspective of someone in the Chinese diaspora as well. But I think she would be a big Severance girly. So, especially because, her job feels very like
It's very much
banal.
like hidden
Yeah.
corporate girly.
Yeah, very corporate girly, and I think she would enjoy this idea of the metaphor of like late stage capitalism and zombies. So,
I love that for her. No, girl, as a bookseller, I really wish I had that skill of like remembering everything. Whenever people come into the bookstore and they're like, "Do you have this specific book rec for this specific instance?" And I'm like, "Ooh, suddenly I have never read a book in my life." So that is a skill and a superpower. But whenever people come into the bookstore now looking for a book recommendation, I'll be like, "No, you're leaving with the Beast Links towards Beijing. That is the only book rack from here on out."
yeah, why don't you start your new year with some intergenerational trauma? That's what you
Listen,
need.
crying is in 2026, you know?
Yeah, no brain rot, just tears.
No brain rot, just tears. Thank you so much for joining me and answering all of my questions. I had truly so much fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the praise of A Beast Sings Towards Beijing. It still feels quite surreal. Publication date is coming up soon, and I'm still like, oh, this is happening to someone else. But I think talking to booksellers has been so wonderful. Just because, like I said, truly the backbone of the book community, and I think right now we all need that sort of local reading community. But yeah, thank you so much for speaking with me and getting to yap about, just a wide range of topics.
To yap about
JSTOR.
trauma.
Yeah, JSTOR and trauma.
I know by the time everyone listens to this podcast, Beast will be out now. So you can get it at your local independent bookstore. And it is definitely one for the season. So please pick this book up if you like crying and trauma and history and family sagas. Anyway, it was wonderful book. It was a wonderful book, and it was even more wonderful getting to talk to you, Alice.
Thank you, Haley. Thank you to all the booksellers listening in as well.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!